This is an ad by BetterHelp. BetterHelp recently surveyed over 16,000 people and found that while 75% of people believe it's wise to seek support, only 27% of Americans are in therapy, and people stay silent to avoid being judged. BetterHelp has over 10 years of experience matching you with the right therapist. Because we're all better with help. Visit betterhelp.com/stopthestigma for their first ever State of Stigma report, the latest in mental health research.
Hey there, this is Alexis Knight. Welcome to True Crime, the Court of Public Opinion. And today here, we have a special episode of Alexis Knight Investigates, a case that has intrigued and perplexed everyone who's heard it. The mysterious disappearance of 21-year-old Maura Murray. In 2004, Maura's life took a sharp turn down a road that would be forever marked by the unknown. After crashing her car on a remote road in Hampshire, New Hampshire, Maura vanished. She disappeared without a trace, leaving behind more questions than answers and sparking a nationwide search that continues to this day. And now let me be clear about something. This isn't just your typical missing persons case. There's something deeply unsettling about the details surrounding Maura's disappearance. For starters, there was no sign of foul play at the scene, no blood, no struggle, and yet no one saw Maura ever again. She walked away from her wrecked car, leaving only a sparse trail of evidence that did very little to explain why she vanished. Was she abducted? Did she run away on her own? Or, as some suggest, was it something much darker? The possibility that Maura, driven by intense psychological stress, decided to leave everything behind and stage her own disappearance. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why would somebody do that? And if she did run away, why would she choose to leave without a word, without telling anyone? And if this was foul play, why did the person who may have been responsible leave no trace? These are the questions we're going to dig into today. We're not just going to revisit the timeline of the night Maura disappeared. We're going to investigate why no one really knows what happened here. Was she overwhelmed by the pressures in her life and decided to disappear for good? Was she a victim of a crime? Or was she manipulated, drawn into something sinister and forced into making decisions she could never have imagined? But the most haunting part of this story isn't just that Maura Murray is missing. It's that 20 years later, we still do not know what really happened that night. There's no closure, no resolution, just a chilling void where answers should be. And that's exactly what I'm here to investigate. What went wrong that night? And why does this case still haunt us, even when there are so few answers to go on? This is Alexis Knight Investigates, and today we're going deep into the disappearance of Maura Murray. This is a mystery you won't want to miss. All right, let's break this down step by step. On February 9th in 2004, Maura Murray was a 21-year-old nursing student at the University of Massachusetts. She was a young woman with her whole life ahead of her. So what happened that night? Maura was involved in a car crash, but it wasn't just any crash. She was driving on a remote stretch of Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire, when her car veered off the road and hit a tree. But here's where it gets strange. There wasn't much damage to the car. It wasn't a major crash by any means, no serious injuries. In fact, she was reported to be unharmed. And this is where the story starts to take a dark turn. When police arrived at the scene, Maura was nowhere to be found. A passing motorist saw her walking away from the crash site. She wasn't stumbling or in distress, she was simply walking away. She didn't ask for help. She didn't call anyone for assistance, and certainly didn't seem to be in any kind of danger. At first, it was believed that Maura might have left the scene to find help. But when the authorities arrived, there was no sign of her, not even a trail leading away from the crash site. Nothing. Not a single clue to explain her disappearance. What we do know is that Maura was last seen heading into the woods, alone, and with no immediate indication of what her next steps might have been. Now here's the thing. In cases like this, the crash is often the first clue. But with Maura, there were no signs of foul play at the scene. The car wasn't tampered with, and there were no visible injuries on her. Her belongings were left behind. So why did she leave the crash site? Why walk away into the night when she could have just called for help? And why would she leave in such a calm and collected manner if she was in distress? Didn't add up. Doesn't add up. Something happened after the crash, but what? Did Maura take off on her own? Or was there something more sinister at play? We need to ask, what was she running from? All we know is that Maura was walking away from the crash site, but no one knew what her intentions were. She didn't seem to be in distress or stumbling. So it wasn't even obvious to the motorist that saw her that she had been involved in an accident. After the motorist passed, Maura was last seen heading into the woods. That's all we know. Okay, now that we've covered the basics of the crash and the eerie disappearance of Maura, let's dig into the theories that have emerged. So the first theory, of course, is foul play. You might be wondering, how could Maura walk away from the accident site without any sign of injury, and then just vanish into the woods? And why, after a passing motorist saw her, was she never found? Could someone have been involved? Was Maura abducted? There are some unsettling details that point toward this possibility. For one, Maura was in a very isolated location, and there were no immediate signs of other vehicles or people nearby. If someone had been following her or waiting nearby, it would have been easy for them to seize the opportunity when she was alone and walking away from the crash. It's important to remember that Maura's crash was not a major one. There was no major damage, so she could have walked away. But she didn't tell anyone where she was going or why she was leaving the scene, and there were no signs of her ever attempting to even get help. Why would she have walked into the woods, especially when it was so cold out, without trying to flag down passing cars or calling someone for assistance? Some of the theories suggest that Maura may have been targeted by someone who had been waiting for an opportunity to attack. And so when she was walking alone, they acted quickly. It is not unheard of for criminals to prey on people in isolated areas like this, and Maura's situation might have been the perfect storm. The problem is, there's no solid evidence to support this. No forensic evidence was found to suggest a struggle or anything that would indicate that she was attacked. Still, the possibility of foul play remains one of the most unsettling aspects of this case. Let's now consider another possibility. What if Maura wasn't taken? What if she was running away on her own? This theory is one of the more chilling aspects of the case because it suggests that Maura might have planned to disappear, had the idea herself. The idea that Maura staged her own disappearance is something that has been heavily debated, but there are some intriguing details that suggest Maura could have been under an immense amount of stress leading up to her disappearance. Let's look at her life in the days before the crash. Maura had been going through some difficult personal struggles. She'd been dealing with academic pressures, issues with her family, and the fallout from a previous car accident. Her behavior in the days leading up to her disappearance seemed to be erratic. She had even been seen acting strangely at work, and one of her professors described her as being emotionally distant. She was also reportedly struggling with a relationship and the uncertainty of her future. It is a lot going on. A few days before her crash, Maura had packed up some of her belongings, which led to speculation that she might have been planning to leave. She even called a couple of places to make arrangements for the weekend. First, a place to stay in New Hampshire, and second, a trip to a nearby town for a fresh start. Was this the act of someone planning to run away, or someone under intense emotional strain? Did she decide that she'd had enough, and fleeing into the woods was her way of escaping it all? But if she were running away, why not leave a note? Why not contact anyone or make a plan that would allow her to disappear more safely? And why would she leave behind her car? These questions are what make this theory so unsettling. Was she really trying to escape her life? Or was there something else happening in the moments before her disappearance? We'll never know for sure unless more evidence surfaces, but the psychological strain Maura was under in the weeks before her disappearance may have played a huge role in her decision to leave. All right, now let's take a closer look at a theory that hasn't gotten as much media attention, but is equally as important. Could mental health issues have played a role in Maura's disappearance? Mental health, especially among college students, can sometimes be overlooked or even dismissed. But we know that emotional distress can have serious consequences. In Maura's case, there are multiple signs that suggest she was under a significant amount of psychological pressure leading up to her crash. As I mentioned before, Maura had a history of struggling with personal issues, academic pressure, family concerns, and a difficult romantic relationship. These factors can weigh heavily on anyone, but for someone already in a vulnerable position, they can become overwhelming. Maura's behavior in the days before her disappearance was strange, and her emotional state was reportedly off. She had been dealing with what seemed like a perfect storm of stress, and this is where the theory about Maura possibly deciding to take her own life into her own hands comes into play. There are experts who believe that people under this kind of psychological strain can make impulsive decisions, one that might not seem rational in the moment. The idea that Maura could have driven to a remote part of New Hampshire with the intention to disappear or even end her life isn't as far-fetched as it might seem. Some people believe that after crashing her car, she may have walked into the woods, possibly planning to harm herself, or simply escape into the wilderness to end the pain. This theory doesn't offer easy answers, but it's one that fits with Maura's actions and her mental state before the crash. At this point in the investigation, we have to consider the possibility that someone knows more than they have let on. After all, Maura wasn't in a completely isolated area. She wasn't alone. People were nearby. So the question becomes, could there be someone involved who hasn't been truthful about what happened that night? Could someone be hiding the truth? In many unsolved cases, there's always the chance that key witnesses or potential suspects withhold information for various reasons. But there's one thing about this case that stands out. The town of Haverhill, New Hampshire. It isn't just a random spot on the map. It's a close-knit community. The idea that someone saw something but didn't speak up has been a troubling point for investigators. Could there be someone who was there that night, who saw Maura or interacted with her, but then didn't come forward? Some theories suggest that someone may have been involved with Maura after the crash, whether they stopped to offer help or saw her walking alone in a vulnerable state. And if that's the case, what did they do next? Did they simply drive off, leaving her to disappear? Or did they become involved in a way that's harder to explain? We don't know because despite numerous investigations and tips over the years, nothing concrete has surfaced to provide clarity. As we delve deeper into Maura's case, we need to examine the search efforts that followed her disappearance. After Maura was seen walking into the woods, a massive search operation was launched. Authorities, search dogs, and volunteers scoured that area for days, but found nothing. No clues, no signs of Maura, nothing to suggest where she went or what happened to her. And the case became more perplexing with each passing day. Over the years, numerous tips have come in, some credible, some not so much. Search teams have even conducted extensive digs in the woods near where Maura was last seen, but nothing concrete has ever been found. Despite all the effort, the mystery only deepened. The cold, remote nature of the area where she vanished makes it difficult to imagine how she could have gotten very far without leaving some kind of trail behind. Now, here's where things take a turn. In cases like this, it's common for families and friends to hold out hope for years and years that someone will eventually come forward with the missing piece of the puzzle. Maura's family has never given up, continuing to search and advocate for answers. But over time, the frustration grows. How much longer can they keep pushing without any new leads? What does this say about the effectiveness of the search? Are we missing something? Or has the truth just been buried so deeply that it's beyond reach? Maura's case, like many high-profile missing person cases, became a media spectacle. The coverage of her disappearance made her a household name, but it also added another layer of complexity to the whole situation. On one hand, media attention can help keep the case alive, pushing for more resources and encouraging new tips and witnesses to come forward. But on the other hand, the way the public perceives the case can cloud the investigation, turning a tragedy into a spectacle. In Maura's case, media reports have often focused on the more sensational aspects. Her personal life, her emotional state, her background. And while it is important to understand the context, it also risks overshadowing the search for the truth. Could some of the theories about Maura running away or the possibility of mental health struggles be the result of how the media presented her story, rather than the reality of what really happened that night? The portrayal of Maura's life, her pressures, the ways she's been discussed in the public eye, it could have shaped the way people view her disappearance. By now, we've looked at the possibility of foul play, the theory that Maura was running away, and the confusing nature of the search efforts. But there's another crucial angle we need to consider, the psychological one. Could Maura's disappearance been a cry for help, a desperate act driven by the overwhelming pressure she was under? As we've already seen, Maura was dealing with a lot in the days leading up to her disappearance. She was juggling academic stress and family issues, and the emotional turmoil of a relationship that seemed to be on the rocks. But was this just a perfect storm of personal issues? Or was Maura trying to escape life, a life that was spiraling out of control in her eyes? It's important to consider that sometimes people who feel they have nowhere to turn, they will take drastic measures in order to cope. Could Maura's disappearance have been a way to escape everything? The weight of her responsibilities, the pressure of her future, and the uncertainty of her mental state. It's possible that Maura didn't intend to stay gone permanently, but instead saw this as a way to escape the overwhelming stresses of her life. Some experts suggest that in extreme cases, people under significant emotional and psychological strain may make decisions that seem irrational to others, but they make sense in their own minds at the time. The psychological toll of living with constant pressure, especially when you are young and trying to figure out your place in the world, it can lead to extreme actions. Maura's sudden disappearance could very well be tied to a mental health crisis, a desperate attempt to break free from the world she felt she could no longer manage. But now I do want to touch on the theory if she took her own life, as I mentioned, because where would she have gone then, right? This is a question. The area around the crash site was thoroughly searched by police, search dogs, and volunteers. The woods surrounding the crash site, they were scoured, and yet her body was never found. If she had taken her own life in the woods that night, wouldn't the body have been discovered? After all, it's very difficult to imagine that someone could vanish so completely in an area that was so heavily searched. There were no remains, no physical evidence that Maura was in the woods for long periods, and certainly no sign of suicide. Now, there are some who suggest that Maura may have intentionally hidden herself, making her body harder to find, and it's possible, though highly unlikely, that she went deep into the woods with the intent to end her own life. But even with extensive searches, her body never surfaced. The fact remains, if Maura had ended her life out there, it seems improbable that her body would not have been found eventually. And so we're left with a disturbing question. Why was her body never found? Was it because Maura didn't take her life at all, and the theory of suicide is simply too convenient an explanation? Or could there be a much darker, more sinister reason why no trace of her was left behind? As we reach the end of this investigation, we find ourselves back at square one. Despite years of searching, countless theories, and hours of media coverage, the truth about what happened to Maura Murray remains elusive. Was she the victim of foul play? The tragic result of someone who saw an opportunity in her vulnerability? Was she running away from a life she couldn't handle? Or was she trying to escape in a way that we still don't fully understand? Or, as some suggest, was she simply driven to disappear due to a mental health crisis, disappearing into the cold, isolated woods, leaving nothing behind but a fractured trail of evidence? And the fact is, in a case like this, we can only speculate. And as frustrating as that is, it's the nature of this case. When someone disappears without a trace, when there are no witnesses, no clear answers, the questions pile up. Theories are all we have to work with. But even after all of this time, with all of the theories, the search, and the unresolved suspicions, one thing is clear. There's still no closure. Some might say that Maura's case is simply a mystery, something we may never understand. But others argue it's a case of a system failing to follow up on crucial leads, or that someone out there knows exactly what happened, but they're staying silent for reasons we can't yet understand. This isn't just a missing persons case. It's a story of a young woman caught between the pressures of life and the mental and emotional challenges that can push someone to make the most desperate of decisions. As we think about the mystery of Maura Murray, it's important to consider the psychological impact, not just on the people involved, but on society as a whole. We live in an age where we expect answers quickly. Justice is something that typically delivers with time. But in cases like Maura's, the unanswered questions leave us in limbo. But a case like this, when it remains unsolved, it's not just the family and close friends who feel the pain. It's everyone who follows the story, the media and the public. The need for closure is something deeply ingrained in human nature, and when we don't get it, it doesn't just linger, it festers. Think about how this case has lived on year after year with no resolution. The psychological strain on Maura's family is obvious. Her parents have to live with the constant uncertainty, never knowing for sure what happened to their daughter, and the mental toll that has taken on them over nearly 2 decades is unimaginable. Every lead, every new theory must bring hope, but then it's always followed by the crushing reality that the truth is still out there, hiding just beyond reach. For people who followed this case closely, there's also a strange kind of frustration that grows year after year as new information comes to light, but then nothing truly concrete is discovered. And for those who might have been involved or have pieces of the puzzle, the case represents a huge psychological burden as well. Could someone be harboring information that they're not sharing? Are they afraid of the consequences if the truth comes out? Or are they somehow complicit in keeping the mystery alive, knowingly allowing the family to suffer, to wait for answers that may never come? Now, let's turn our focus to the role that the media has played in this case. Overall, while it's true that media attention can keep a case alive and encourage people to come forward, there's also that downside. The intense coverage surrounding this case and her disappearance may have unintentionally contributed to a narrative that's very hard to break free from. We've seen this in other high-profile cases. Media outlets sometimes sensationalize the details and focus on aspects of a person's life that may or may not be relevant to the investigation. With Maura, the constant speculation about her mental state and the theories about her relationship problems and her emotional distress in some ways overshadowed the facts. The focus on her personal life may have shifted attention away from finding concrete answers about her disappearance. While the media's role in keeping the case in the public eye is undeniably important, it can also contribute to the creation of theories that are more about the drama than the truth. This media cycle, combined with the human tendency to fill in gaps with assumptions, can turn an investigation into a kind of entertainment, something that people start to follow obsessively, but ultimately still lacks any resolution. For Maura's family and for the many people who have followed this case, the pain of uncertainty is something that no one should have to endure. It's an unsettling reminder that not every mystery can be solved. Not every person can be brought home. Sometimes we just have to live with the unanswered questions. So, where do we go from here? What is the conclusion of this investigation into Maura Murray's disappearance? Well, there's no easy answer. Theories continue to swirl. The investigation is ongoing, and the pain for her family continues. No matter how many theories we explore, no matter how many leads are followed, we're still left with the same question. What happened? For now, it remains one of the most haunting unsolved mysteries. But in the end, the story of Maura Murray isn't just about the search for answers. It's a reflection of the human condition, the need for closure, the weight of unanswered questions, and the darkness that sometimes surrounds our lives when things go wrong. And even if the answers never come, Maura's case is a reminder that every missing person, every unsolved mystery deserves to be remembered. Thank you for joining me on this chaotic ride through the mystery of Maura Murray's disappearance. Stay safe out there, guys. Ask the difficult questions and always dig for the truth. Until next time, this is Alexis Knight.